Hey everybody, Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through the Bible. So today is day 179, and we are in First Corinthians. We're in the first chapter. We're going to be going through the second half of the first chapter, talking about, well, starting out with why the gospel is just, it's folly to some people, most people. And it's ridiculous to a lot of people, but it's not ridiculous, and it's full of power. And if you've put your trust in Jesus, you know that. And I hope you are in action right now, trusting Christ in your moment to moment. But in general, just entrusting your heart to Jesus isn't folly. It's not I love that word, folly. It's not a foolish venture. It's a wise venture. So, anyway, thank you for the likes. Thank you for subscription. We got another subscriber here a couple days ago. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the comments on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And occasionally I post on True Social. So, yeah, I hope you're doing well. If you ever have any prayer requests, post them in the comments. And sometimes I don't see the YouTube comments right away, but if I see it, I'll pray for you, okay? And if you're posting on Facebook, obviously, I check that every day, so. But I think that's everything. Why don't we get in the Word? Let's pray. Lord, I love you. God, thank you for your word. God, your word isn't folly. It is full of power. Lord, we love you. Please speak to us. Please send us your power, your understanding. Please elevate our understanding. And protect us from the evil one. And we ask that in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. All right. It is a wonderful evening out here. Love sitting out here. It's not cold, but sometimes I like to just wear a beanie. So, all right. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the wise one? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God, God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, miracles, and Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified. It's a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in this world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being may boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption. So that, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. Man, that's good. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. For, so there's a clause there. There's a reason it's there for, building an argument on top of something. So what's the for, therefore, for? Well, just previous to that, if you remember last time we were together, Paul finished up his opening there about divisions in the church and stuff, and he closed with this concept. He said, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel." So we focused in a lot on that. The implications of, what's Paul saying? Is baptism necessary? Some churches think so, some don't. That's probably not what he's after here. But here he finishes that refrain there, or that sentence, and he says, to preach the gospel, and not with words of eloquent wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. But to those who are being saved, us who are being saved, it's the power of God. For Christ did not send me to baptize, preach the gospel, not with words of eloquent wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. Eloquent words are putting too much, I don't know. Putting too much I want to be careful here, because Paul has written very detailed and wise letters. I mean, Peter tells us, some of the things that Paul writes are very hard to understand, and we just went through the book of Romans, and it's not as though that book was written in foolish language or simple language. But Paul also shares that when, he's accused of, when he's being in the presence of people, they notice that his letters are very weighty, that they're heavy. And to that end, basically, the very thing that, he's saying here, there's eloquent wisdom. But I basically think he's just saying, look, I'm not trying to throw out a bunch of flowery extra talk. I'm not trying to hide the truth behind language. But it's a simple message when you get down to it. It's the message of a Messiah promised and sent, that is God in the flesh, that paid the price for all of our bad and gave us all of God's good. And the only way you can transact on that is by entrusting yourself to that person in that act, taking your faith and trusting. There's no amount of doing or keeping of rules that will do it. There's no amount of working of special miraculous things on the side over here. There's no amount of flowery teaching around it. It's just a simple message. Jesus said, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. What should we do to be saved, Jesus? And he looks at him and he says, this is the work. This is the stuff you got to do. This is the law you got to keep. Believe in him, he's pointing to himself, whom he points up, as it were, the Father has sent. Doesn't get much simpler than that. And Paul says that this sounds like idiocy. Just absolute foolishness. And it does. Look, if you just got saved, you know how ridiculous it sounds. If you've been saved for a while, it doesn't sound as ridiculous as it once did to you, or you can't even remember. The idea that in this vast universe, a simple, nearly barefoot teacher out in the, a hayseed from the hill country of, a far-flung country at the edge of the Mediterranean, believed that he fulfilled a bunch of somewhat vague prophetic writings and looped them all in together and said, that's me. And then probably did some special stuff and people thought it was pretty great, but there's some other religious figures that maybe did the same thing, and he's pretty smart and quick-witted. But when you're around a lot of simple-minded folks, even the people who were religiously trained, he kind of spun them around in circles because he was smart. And he saw it, he grew up with it, he knew that he kind of fit the bill, and he wore it. And he planned with a rich guy to have him put in a grave, and then the Jews of the time, the Jewish leadership, told the story that he was stolen and taken out of the grave, and they paid off the soldiers. And you could just as easily flip that story around and say that, yeah, they did, and that the people who wrote the Bible told the story that these religious leaders made up this other story about them doing the very thing they did. Some sort of psychological warfare. So you can twist this thing around, and people, have for hundreds and hundreds of years. But in each and every case, as you look at the gospel, God fulfills what he says next. I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. So when somebody takes the story of Jesus and various aspects and starts to try and chip away and pick at it, they might knock off a flake of paint off the car, as it were, but you ain't stripping the whole thing down. At the end of the day, with all the effort, you've still got a car and it's still painted blue or whatever. Knocking a couple flakes off through argument and discernment, and all your bending over backwards to deny various aspects of history and things that have been written here and proved, and then the lives and personal testimonies of people that you've trusted up to this point, but now they believe in Jesus, and all of a sudden they're liars or idiots, right? It's basically equivalent to scratching up some paint off a car and then saying the car is not a car anymore and it's not the color it was painted. But God says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? That somebody writes down the stuff that's been written before. Make sure there's good copies. Where is the debater of this age? Remember Paul debating the philosophers, the Stoics, Epicureans, and whatnot up on the hill, Mars Hill? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. Ain't that the truth? You know, I didn't start out as a believer. I've told this story. And I held up, from the beginning, I came to a conclusion, a basic premise, when I was in high school and I started this search. God gave me a bit of an epiphany. I didn't know it was God, but now looking back, I realize it was the Lord. And just that I needed to know what the truth was in this world. As I had observed to that point, and I think confirmed over the next 8 years or so, in that search, there was enough evidence in this life, this experience, that this world wasn't a figment of nothingness, that it is a actual somethingness. There's something here. We're here. And there's a basic underlying thing in that it is a broken thing. That's obvious to us all. But there is a truth, or a core truth, somewhere in all of it. And we aren't all so different that truth should be different, but that there should be something that's true for us all. That's not to say that at that point I thought that there only had to be one answer. But that one answer might express itself, like many people who believe in multiple answers that all kind of rest on the same underlying truth. A sort of universalistic answer, right? But listen here, it says, God made foolish the wisdom of the wise. How? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. As I pursued truth, and I held all things up to be possibly true, I let them all fall under their own weight. Some things fell apart very quickly. Like, looking on the outside, they put like good marketing on an idea or a lifestyle or a way of doing things, or an idea about how it all works. But when you actually go in and you really start poking around, it starts to crumble down. And not the people, because everybody's broken and everybody practices poorly. But when you really start getting into it, it all kind of starts to fall apart. When I, early on in college, had pursued philosophy, I was studying philosophy, I had a scholarship. Not a great scholarship, but a Western undergraduate exchange scholarship. It basically allowed me to go to an out-of-state Western school for in-state price and stuff. And I was a philosophy major, and I had spent a lot of time on my own working through a lot of the philosophical questions. So I thought when I got to university that we were going to actually work with those ideas. I prepared myself. I had worked through a lot of Pythagoras's concepts around, I wasn't an expert in the mathematics of Pythagoras, but there's a lot of basic concepts about the structure of thought around the numbers and ideas there, a lot of thoughts around Platonic views about forms, and there's ideas about logic that come out of Stoicism, and there's all kinds of different things. When I showed up, I had gone through a lot of these things from a base level, from asking those questions and working them through. It's just been hours and hours and hours and hours walking. And at that time, after I left the Army, I knew there was a God, so I talked to God and worked these things out. So then I go to university, and I'm sitting in class, and I realize, oh my goodness, nobody here knows how to talk about any of these ideas. And the professor, whatever professor I had, was just basically reading out of the book what the idea was. They weren't particularly all that skilled at talking. I mean, they could kind of teach through the idea, but the idea that we could then take these tools, these ideas that were surfaced in history by really, really brilliant, wonderful people. I don't know how wonderful they were, but people that really got at something that God made. And again, I was kind of waffling on, I didn't necessarily think that was the God of Jesus Christ at all, but that there was some sort of divine reality there. And but this whole idea, I kept I'd bring it up occasionally. I'd say, like, well, why don't we do something with this? Let's apply these thinking methods, and let's work it out. Let's find an answer with these things. And it was like, more like, why don't you just memorize how I'm teaching it? It wasn't actually like, let's use this wisdom. Let's use this discernment. So, okay, that was kind of a disappointment, but I went through that year at university and really was disappointed at the end of the year by the level of training that we were getting. And I had worked through a lot of things. I'd just go out at night and go to the center of the campus. There was kind of one of those, big brick circles and the school seal at the middle, and big starry night and all the buildings, and people occasionally walk by or whatever, going to a party, and I just kind of like ride my bike around in circles and think and talk things out and work through whatever I was learning in philosophy. And then once I understood it, then I'd turn around and ride back the other direction and work myself all the way through each step in a reverse order. So I truly understood it. And I remember at the end of that year, I left, I went back. I was not going to go back to that school. I was really disappointed. I was going to go do something else. And I had gone away for about a week at the end of the summer, and kind of a hitchhiking trip around. And at the end of that trip, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to go back. I wanted to go give it another shot and see if I could make something of that school, that program. And so I ended up back in that school, and although I didn't understand that my Western undergraduate scholarship had been taken from me because they sent the renewal letter to the wrong address, I was back at the school, total faith that I was going to step forward and keep working on this there, despite my lack of, trust in the program to do more with it, but I was going to try. And I realized, oh no, now my scholarship's gone, and now I have to decide what to do. And I sat down with this really amazing guy, Michael, and this lady who ran the local, soup kitchen. A couple of really just godly people. And he spent his life, a very simple life, renting a simple room, and he made it his life to just talk to college students and people and ask them questions in a Socratic method, but also kind of illuminate concepts that were often hidden by prejudice towards the gospel by all the highfalutin thinking of the campus. And I remember spending hours, and I laid out everything I had learned up to that point, all my time in the Army, all my time prior, all my time post university, and I laid out all my explanation, and I explained, and it'll make sense why I'm telling this story to this verse, that the basic substructure of everything that we know relies on the tree trunk of philosophy. And the tree trunk of philosophy, which all the branches of all the sciences and all the liberal arts come off of, it owes its search for truth, all of them, on this trunk of philosophical understanding. And at the base, the seed of the tree, are the functional questions that everybody has, which is why and how and what, and its categories of who, when, and where. And all the end of what those questions can arrive at is only answers on this side of the veil. It can acknowledge that there's something more because it's evident, but it can't ever arrive at something more than what it has, which is what is here. It can make inferences. It can say that there are things that seem to be more than what we have. And every time they make a scientific discovery, they go, oh, we found it, right? Some new level of seeing deeper or seeing farther or seeing beyond the complexity of this phase of reality. But at every point, they discover wait a minute, now there's something more. And it has a heartbeat of truth in it. And that heartbeat of truth is that which is just beyond this veil. It is, for since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. God set up this world. We can get ever so close with wisdom and discernment to see patterns and recognition of a creator. We can get there to see the intricate detail that is not chaotic but organized. We can see and somehow understand and perceive a spiritual nature, and yet still feel that ever subtle distance to the one who gave us that spiritual nature, until you accept this foolish answer, this thing that makes us humble all of our wisdom, that makes us lay it all down and accept this simple, brilliant truth that the death of a man from a desert fulfilled a bunch of scribblings that were special in history. And he illuminated those around him to know that he was, in fact, that one beyond the veil. That he was the one who gave us that spiritual nature in this intricate, beautiful world. And that he loved us so much that he was willing to pierce through that, come down through, only one, and to abide with us, live with us, teach us, share with us, and then die for us. So that we who were here in this corrupted, broken part of this world could then be raised with him. And through that moment of understanding, that thing which looks so foolish to the world is actually the thing which liberates our minds and our spirit and everything. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. It's a stumbling block to Jewish people. It's folly, it's idiocy to the rest of the world. But to those who are called, whether you're Jewish, Greeks, rest of the world, Christ is the power of God. Christ is the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God, God's idiocy that he shares, what we consider foolishness, is wiser than men, all men and women. And the weakness of God, whatever that is stronger than all of our might. And you can think, there aren't many of us that believe in Jesus that do come from wealth or power, come from, higher levels of learning. And all these things actually make us think that we're more powerful or smart than we actually are in comparison to the weakness and the foolishness of God. We aren't that smart, even if we are. We aren't that wealthy, even if we have some. We aren't that powerful, even if we are kind of strong in this world, as compared to the Lord. So if we're going to boast, if we're going to lift up ourselves in something, it's not lifting ourselves up for ourselves' sake. It's like, I'm going to boast in the Lord. And I don't care if you think I'm an idiot. I don't care if you think I'm stupid. I know the Lord. And that can piss you off. You can be like, no, you don't. You only think you do. And make him mad. And you should ask yourself why it makes you mad. What do you care? Well, you care because someone who knows the Lord like I do, if I have peace and I have sureness in my faith, and I do not have doubt in it, that pisses you off because you don't have it. It upsets you. And it's not me. It's that exists or seems to exist. So, I would say instead of shaking your fist at somebody, and I used to do it, even at that university. I used to run into some Christians and man, I'd give them a hard time. Your book's written not by fishermen, it's written by scholars and changed over the centuries. And I'd say all kinds of crap I didn't know what I was talking about at the time because that's what my professors told me. Absolute lies. Things that weren't founded in any historical accuracy at all. I had teachers at my university, one in particular, who was adamant, saying things without any source material. And of course, we didn't know. Like, you just assume the guy teaching a university class, like an esteemed, well thought of professor, not some radical, young guy with a master's, wielding opinions, but like somebody who'd been around and carefully thought through things and taught philosophy day in and day out, saying stuff about how this book was not written the way that every scholar in the world, even critics, have to admit now it's written. So, anyway. All of our wisdom in this world, as precious and wonderful as it is as a gift, can never arrive fully at the knowledge of God. The only way you fully arrive at the knowledge of God is through this foolish answer as it appears to the wisdom of this world. And that is the doorway that you walk through. So, until next time, keep walking. God bless you. Bye-bye.